recording. Okay, who are we going to go? What we're going to do, we're going to build the actual enterprise right here, basically also using primitives for a guy that started for the most part. And so what I'll do is I'll just review what we did here. I'm going to hide everything and start brand new. So I'm in standard primitives. We'll do a cylinder for the main saucer. I believe that the measurements that I set up, a radius of, what did I say, 64, height of 5, cap segments of 1 or 2, height segments of 1, 16 size. Great, groovy, awesome. Now what I'm going to do next is the actual top and bottom of the actual ship. Alright, they have a little bit distinct difference between the top and bottom, but they both have the starting point of a cone. Now, knowing what my actual size is of my cylinder, I know my radius is 64, so I can copy that if I wanted to. Go into cone. Now I'm going to go into top view now. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click on the move tool right there. It gives me this pop up. Not there. Hit there. 0, 0, 0. 0 everything out so we know that sphere's at the origin. Go to cone. I'm going to hit, just start creating it and kind of get the idea what I want. Right click to deactivate the functionality of it. Now I'm going to here. I don't want to make it 64 because it comes in a little bit, still it has some flat part to it. If we go to the actual reference, you can see that's flat right there, flat in the bottom. So we're going to keep that mentality. So we're going to go, I think I had it at 53. Can y'all see the numbers on the board? Can y'all see the numbers on the board? Is that 54? What did I say? For the cone? No one's listening. 16. On the side, that's at 13. 16. Alright, so I'm going to move the height. Slide that up. Now, the height of the actual cone is about the same as the height of the actual cylinder, so that's about 5. So I'm going to probably make that about height. Make that maybe, let's make that 9. Alright, so hit F4 to get out of the wireframe shaded view. I'm going to select both these objects. I'm going to go up to this pink box right here, click on that and make them gray. I'm going to turn off assign random colors so I can just keep that thing just as gray every time I make a new object. Alright, so what I want to do now is I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to clone by holding shift and moving in the Z axis of this object. I get to make a clone of my object to copy. And I'm going to rotate it. Now, by default, when I rotate, the rotation is in a 2 decimal point variation, and that's going to be very difficult to make accurate. But if I click on this right here, it says angle snap toggle, which is A on your keyboard. Turn that on, and now I'm going to be rotating in 5-degree increments. And that's going to be a lot easier to get it zeroed out to 180. Now I'm going to go into my move tool and just slide that right up there, kind of nuzzle it up there nicely. Now I want to add a taper to it, so what I'm going to do first is add to this one right here to kind of get a little bit of a taper in there. It's not a whole lot, but it's subtle, and I like it. So let's mimic that quick. So I'm going to right click on here and open up the parametric modifiers. I'm going to use the taper, and it's going to be a negative value. I think I did negative 0.1. Negative 0.1. That's 0.7. I think it's a little much for 7. I meant to hit 1, 2, 2. There, it's a little better. I meant 0.4 is what I said. Cool. So to repeat that, all I did was add a taper and set the amount to negative 0.4. So now I got that taper going pretty good. Now the neat thing is that everything is lining up quite nicely because I'm using 16 sides for each round object. So I'm going to do is select all of them. I'm going to slide them up. Excuse me. And what we're going to work on next is the main body. Cigar shaped thing that it is. These two angles are hard to see the actual length compared to the actual disc. So what I'm going to do here is look at this angle, which I found on the internet. And it looks like this object is about two-thirds the size of this object. And that's about the size we're going to go with. So what I end up with the number, if I do is cylinder. Now I'm going to move out of my single view, which is Alt W, to go to my 4 view. I'm going to move into my front view because that's where I'm going to build the base of the cylinder. So I'm going to start right here, go to cylinder, create right on the origin, create it, and then click and drag, let go, and then drag again. And so let's go into the actual numbers to help kind of keep this thing in proportion. I use a radius of 15 and a height of 100. And if I were to actually move this down a little bit, probably move it up a little bit, and I kind of look at this angle and I compare it to my reference here, I'm not far off. So I'm not mad at that. So let's keep going. So I'm going to take this one. Now, the next question is, are the pontoons, they look about the same length as the body. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that value just for right now. I can always add things, change things later. But so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold Shift again and just clone it on the X. I'm going to make a copy. And I'm going to go into my radius and I'm going to make that, I think it was an 8 that I made it. A 9, I think 9's too big. I think 7 is good. And I'm visualizing this. I'm not actually doing any real measurements. I don't have anything written down. So I'm going to kind of place everything kind of in position. I know I can clone this guy later, so I'm going to hold off on this for right now. I'm just going to make one and then fix it later. Let's get back to the body, because the body has some more extra work we need to do to it. It's going to have a cigar bulbous shape here. I unfortunately do not have an idea of how to make this without going too deep into the tools, which we'll get into later this semester. So we're just going to not worry about this little bevel and this little divot in the back. We'll just make it a straight cylinder, but we will get to the radar dish. So let's go ahead and make, let's get some geometry. So I'm going to add some height segments. I think 5 should be a good number. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a taper. Now the tapers, it goes from fat to the front and skinny to the back. So let's go ahead and make that the way it is. That means the amount's going to go to the negative. But there's also that little cigar bulbousness in there, which kind of has some thickness around here in the middle. So let's go and add that. When we use this, we're going to use what's called the curve. And that just adds a little more shape to our object. Already starting to look a little better. Starting to see the shape and the object come along just nicely. Alright, so let's go back to the pontoon real quick. The pontoon is pretty straight. There's not much else to it. We just need to add the sphere here, and we can add another sphere at the back. And that's really easy. So I'll go back to the front view so I can line it right on up and go to the Create panel where I go and click on Sphere. I'm going to try to match it up as close as possible to this object. And I'll show you some align tools here in a little bit. Now, a default sphere is actually at 32 segments, which isn't a bad number, as we talked about before when referring to quads. And let's turn off this because it's had all the settings I had earlier. So this is what we would actually default with an actual cylinder. If I move this over here, kind of look at it, kind of off on all the sides here. So let's kind of get this set up. It's a 7 unit radius. And I'm going to change the segments to 16. So everything's matching up nicely. I love the way it's looking. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the Align tool. Now the Align tool, which is right here, looks like basically mater on the side, 2 buck teeth. You got one object selected and you select the other object you want to align to. Now immediately the object goes straight to the middle of this object, and that's in the actual Y-axis. You can see that because that's where this angle is set up right here. So what I can do here is do center and then turns the Y off. But I do want to want to match the Z to the height of the rotation and the X. And as you see, as I turn these things on and off, you can see slight adjustments in each one of those units. So turn on X, see that, and turn on Z. See how it's lined up? And it's right where we left it on the Y-axis, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. So now I've got the basic setup for this object. I can probably go ahead and just take this and hold Shift and clone it right over here. Sweet. Well, there's one pontoon. I can hold Shift and slide it over, but I'm going to wait because I still got to make the actual arm that holds it. So let's go to the next step and let's make the cylinder for the radar dish. Hold Z, click on here and hit Z to focus my camera on my object. Go back to Create, go back to Sphere. And we could duplicate it, sure. but let's just go ahead and create it and match it right there. Same thing here. Now, when we first created the sphere, you saw that I had this hemisphere on. So let's go ahead and turn hemisphere on, which is right there in my modify. Let's go to modify panel quick. Hemisphere, hit 0.5, and I'm going to slide this out. All right, starting to look like a dish. Yeah, kind of. Well, we're going to cheat it. Like I said, there's just getting the ideas of what we're after. So I'm going to use the scale tool, which is R, and scale on the Y, and just kind of slide this thing into position. In a few weeks, we'll be getting into where we can, actually next class, we'll be cutting into this cylinder and making it more like an actual radar dish, but at the moment, this is sufficient for me for this grade. So slide you in, slide you up. And now I want to think about the actual neck and the arms holding everything together. So those are rectangles, but what I want to do is change the type of rectangle to where I can actually have these curved, beveled edges. If I go back to my create panel, let's kind of get lined up here. A little lower, a little higher. I could do this all day. All right, let's move on. So I'm going to go into my create panel, and where it says standard primitives, I'm going to do the pull down menu and go to extended primitives. And here we have chamfered box, chamfered cylinder, some other cool primitives that you can use to build some cool stuff. I'm going to use a chamfered box, and I'm just going to sit right here in the middle of the actual sphere, neck, and the body, and kind of draw this outline that I want, and move it up here. Now, clearly, hold on, I made a mistake, because I got to draw it to get the base shape, the height, and then click again, and then I got to move my mouse to get the actual fillet on. And the fillet is what's causing this chamfer. Now go to modify panel, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Whoopsie. I made a mistake, so I'm hitting Shift Z to redo my viewport. It's an undo for the viewport. All right, this fillet right here I was just talking about, this was handling that curvature right there. And that's where you get a nice beveled edges. And this is what we really want to see in the higher poly stuff. But right now, we're just trying to get this basic shape down. So I'm just going to use these little tools here to kind of get exactly what I want. Fly back out. Damn it, wrong button. There we go. All right, stick that right there. It's perfect, ready to ship. Of course not. Make a copy over here. Copy. Cool. Now this one, I'm gonna watch what I'm gonna do here. This is something I want you guys to pay attention real quick because this may throw you for a loop. We've been working on copies. So every time I made a copy, we've been using this right here. I want to make an instance this time. And I'm going to rotate this thing to this complex, weird angle that this is at. I'm going to kind of slide this in this home here. Now what I can do here is using this one as an instance, so that I can change the height here and actually kind of get an idea of what's happening. So an instance is just basically a duplicate, an absolute duplicate of the object that you have right there, and it's going to do everything the other object has. Now, I got the basic arm there. I can delete this one because I'm pretty much ready to go forward. I'm going to make this a little thinner. And we'll use instances a lot more later on down in this class. It's a real powerful, effective tool. And once you get the handle of it, it'll make more sense. Next thing I want to do is fix this. Now, I'm going to show you a new tool. We've been using the parametric modifiers. What I want to do now is use the free form deformations. If you ever use Photoshop and use a transform box, that's exactly what this is, but it's in 3D. We're going to use an FFD 2x2x2. Right there. I'm going to hit this little blue box right here that's going to isolate it all by itself. When I created this when I put this FFD on top of this object, it gave us this gold cage. Now we're talking about sub-objects, and if I go here and click on this, I open this up. Now I'm looking at sub-objects. I'm going to go to control points, and I can grab those control points, and I can move those control points any which way I want. I can move one control point if I want over here, and then move the rest over here, and it'll take the box with me. The box will deform as good as the geometry you give it, which means if there's more polygons, you'll get a better deformation. That's not what we're after on this. So let's go ahead and close this back, open that button back up. I hit F3 so I can go to wireframe. And the reason why I do that so I can see those pieces, points that I'm collecting. And I can just slide those up and position those where I want to put those. And I can actually change the scale of the box by playing with that as well. Now, if I go back to my image, it's a trapezoid. It's thinner down here than it is up top. So let's go ahead and get that action replicated. And so we're starting to actually get more or less what the shape of the actual enterprise looks like. Now, what I want to do here is grab all these right here, and I want to duplicate them, but mirror it on the other side. And lots of problems could happen, but let's see if I can actually get it to work once. I got all the objects I want to mirror over selected, and I'm going to select this mirror tool. It looks like a butterfly. Click on that, and it hits great. So I'm going to hit instance again. And the reason why I'm making an instance is so that I can actually do and kind of change this to one, and it will reflect it on the other. As an example, I can put the FFD on this arm here and make it a little bit more stylized. I go to my control points, select those, and I can slide those back a little bit. Oops, get all the control points. Slide that back so it has a little bit more aerodynamic, because you need aerodynamics in space where it's a complete vacuum, right? So there's the actual USS Enterprise ready to go. I'm going to do here, so I got all these objects right here. I'm going to go into what's called the group folder, hit group, and call it Trek 01. And now I got my caps lock on, so I got a bad naming convention. It's got Trek 01, it has all the objects in here. Next week when we start working on our objects, we're going to actually work with our naming conventions and naming our objects so that we have more control over them. But for the most part, as long as we have some basic control, we can do stuff with it. Now, all the group is a taped up box that holds all these parts together. They are still separate objects, but they have a single collective selectable node, like an actual empty asset in the game engine. From there, you can add more details. There's a little bitty things here and there. Chamfer box for the still detailed here, the spheres, there's cylinders, there's more details you can add to this. This is a very simplified version of it. But this is exactly what I'm looking for. The proportions are pretty accurate. It actually looks like the USS Enterprise if I didn't put any details into it. Save the scene. Save as. Call it Enterprise. Because that's the first one. I'm going to hit save. And that is how we're going to make the US Enterprise. The details are up on you guys. If I were to put a grade on this, I'd probably give it a strong B. If you add more detail, you could possibly get an A. If you add less detail, possibly a C. But each case is independent, so we'll go after that one-on-one.